Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It was one of those nights where the rain didn't just fall. It hammered the world outside in sheets, rattling the windows and drowning out even the sound of your own breath. Samantha, 22, had just moved into a small rental house tucked at the end of a dead-end street. Her roommates were out of town for the weekend, and she figured a quiet night with hot tea and a true crime podcast would be a good way to relax. By 11 p.m., the wind had picked up and the rain came down harder, painting shadows on the walls as the porch light flickered. Samantha was curled up on the couch, headphones on, completely absorbed in a story about a cold case murder when she thought she saw movement outside the living room window. Just a flicker, could have been a tree limb swaying. She took the headphones off and waited. Nothing. She got up and peeked through the curtain. Just rain and darkness. Still, something didn't feel right. The kind of off-kilter gut feeling you get when someone's standing just behind you. She checked all the doors, locked. She even made sure the windows were secure. Satisfied, she went to the kitchen, put the kettle back on, and returned to the couch. 10 minutes later, she was halfway through another podcast episode when she heard the sound. A metallic tap. It wasn't the rain. It was deliberate, spaced out, rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the back door. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She tiptoed to the kitchen again and stood completely still, listening. There it was again. Tap, tap, tap. She grabbed a flashlight and slowly moved toward the back door. The porch light in the rear had gone out, and the motion sensor wasn't working. When she flipped on the flashlight and shone it through the window in the door, she saw nothing. Just a soaked backyard and the outline of the woods behind it. But then she noticed something horrifying. There was a smear. No, a handprint on the glass. On the inside of the glass. Samantha staggered back. She hadn't opened that door all night. She would have noticed a wet handprint on the inside. The house was silent except for the storm raging outside. That was when she heard another sound. A floorboard creaked from upstairs. Her phone was on the coffee table. She dashed for it, trying not to breathe too loudly. No signal. Typical. The storm had knocked it out. She was trapped. She grabbed a kitchen knife, hands trembling, and crept toward the staircase. It was dark. The lights upstairs were off, but she knew every step by heart. She stepped quietly, every creak under her foot sounding like a gunshot in the silence. Then something moved at the top of the stairs. Just a shadow, shifting. A breath. Hello? She managed to whisper, almost hoping it wasn't real. Silence. Then, a footstep coming toward her. Samantha bolted down the stairs and ran to the front door. She yanked it open into the storm and sprinted barefoot into the street, screaming. The neighbors were mostly elderly, lights off, but she banged on the closest door until someone answered. When police arrived 15 minutes later, they found muddy footprints inside the house, starting at the attic crawlspace entrance, which had been ajar. There were no signs of forced entry, but in the attic, they found a pile of food wrappers, a blanket, and photos of Samantha, photos taken from inside the house. She hadn't been alone that night. She hadn't been alone for days.
Story number 2.
It was a cold, rainy Thursday night in late October when 17-year-old Kayla found herself alone in the house for the first time in months. Her parents had left that afternoon for a weekend trip to visit her grandmother, and her younger brother was staying with a friend. She didn't mind. She actually welcomed the quiet, especially with midterms looming. The wind howled outside, making the rain slap against the windows like 1,000 tiny fists. She curled up on the couch with a blanket, her laptop, and a horror movie playing in the background. Around 9:30 p.m., just as the storm began to pick up, the power flickered and went out for a few seconds. The movie paused, the lights blinked off, and then everything came back, except the kitchen light, which stayed dark. She shrugged it off. The storm probably tripped a breaker. She told herself she'd check it later, but for now, she went back to watching her movie. About 15 minutes later, Kayla heard something strange. It was faint, barely audible over the rain, but definitely there. A soft knock at the front door. She paused the movie. Another knock. Not loud, not urgent. Just steady. It was almost polite. She stood up, pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders, and slowly approached the front door. There was no car in the driveway, no movement outside, just the wet blackness of the street and the shadows of trees blowing in the wind. She looked through the peephole. No one was there. Kayla's heart beat faster. Maybe the wind had blown something against the door. She waited a minute, then slowly backed away. Just as she turned toward the kitchen to get a drink, the knock came again, this time louder, faster. She ran back to the door and looked through the peephole again. Still nothing. She stood frozen, holding her breath, when something caught her eye. A flicker of motion on the staircase behind her, reflected faintly in the glass of a picture frame. She spun around. Nothing. No one. She was starting to feel genuinely unnerved. The kind of creeping fear that starts in the back of your mind and slowly eats its way forward. She walked to the kitchen to grab a flashlight from the drawer, but the moment she stepped into the dark kitchen, she stopped dead. The flashlight was already on, sitting on the counter, pointing toward the hallway. She hadn't left it there. She was sure of that. Her breath caught in her throat. That's when she noticed something even worse. The back door was unlocked, wide open by just an inch, swaying with the wind, rain dripping onto the floor just beneath it. Kayla slammed it shut and locked it, panic now spreading like wildfire. She grabbed the flashlight and her phone, ready to call someone. Her parents, 911, anyone, but her phone showed no service. The storm must have knocked out the tower. She tried to stay calm, moving room to room, checking closets, doors, behind curtains, nothing. She told herself she was being paranoid. The flashlight, maybe she left it out earlier. Maybe she forgot to lock the back door. She just needed to breathe, just needed to ride out the storm. At 10:12 p.m., she heard it again, this time from upstairs. Footsteps. Not creaks from the wind, not the house settling. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the hallway above her. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, her hand trembling around the flashlight. Her voice cracked when she called out, "Hello?" No answer, just the rain against the windows and the soft groan of the house. Then a louder sound, something dragging, across the floor, followed by a sudden sharp bang. It sounded like a door slamming. Kayla ran to the front door, yanked it open, but the storm outside was too violent to escape into. Sheets of rain lashed across the porch, thunder cracked the sky, and the wind threatened to push her back inside. She made a decision she didn't think she'd ever make. She'd hide. She grabbed a kitchen knife, crept into the pantry, and crouched behind a stack of boxes, heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the storm anymore. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then she heard the stairs creak. Once, twice, someone was coming down, slowly, unhurried. Her breathing stopped. The footsteps moved into the kitchen. She could hear them just on the other side of the pantry door. She watched the shadow fall across the crack in the doorframe. Whoever it was, they were standing there, listening. She clenched the knife and squeezed her eyes shut. The shadow lingered, moved slightly, then, just as suddenly, it vanished. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the house. Then silence. She stayed hidden for almost an hour before crawling out, knife still in hand. She checked every room. No one was there. The front door was open, but no signs of forced entry. No footprints. Nothing. The storm passed by morning. The power returned. Her parents came home that afternoon. She never told them what happened. But when she finally built up the courage to review the footage from the security camera above the front door, she saw something that made her blood run cold. At exactly 9:47 p.m., right after she checked the peephole for the second time, a man had walked up to the front door. Tall, thin, wearing a dark hood, he stood motionless for nearly 2 full minutes. Then, slowly, he turned and walked around the side of the house. He never knocked, not once.
Story number 3.
It was a night soaked in rain, the kind that turns the world outside into a blurred mess of shadows and puddles. The kind of night where the wind howls like something lost, searching. Emma was home alone for the first time since her parents left for a weekend trip, and the house felt impossibly vast and quiet. The rain pounded against the windows, a relentless rhythm that seemed to echo every small sound inside. She tried to focus on a movie, but the storm outside kept pulling her attention away. The power flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the house into thick darkness. The only light was the dull gray of the lightning flashes, each one illuminating the living room in ghostly bursts. Emma's phone had no signal. She had tried calling her parents but got nothing but silence. The old house creaked around her like it was breathing, the wooden floors expanding and contracting with the cold and damp. Every creak felt like a footstep. Every shadow seemed to move just beyond her sight. Then she heard it, a soft tapping at the back door. At first she thought it was just the rain, but the tapping turned into a slow, deliberate knock. Emma's heart slammed in her chest as she cautiously moved toward the door. She peered through the peephole, but all she saw was a dark silhouette standing motionless in the rain, their face hidden beneath a soaked hood. She whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. The knocking stopped abruptly. She locked the door and backed away, trying to convince herself it was just some trick of the weather. Minutes later, the tapping returned, this time at the front window. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She didn't dare look. The tapping kept coming, slow, steady, like someone was tracing their fingers over the glass. Her mind raced. The storm knocked out the power, her phone was dead, and whoever was outside knew she was alone. She grabbed a kitchen knife, gripping it tightly, and moved toward the hallway, trying to find a place to hide. Suddenly, the sound of something heavy hitting the back door made her freeze. The door shook violently, the wood creaking as if it might give way. Emma backed into the hallway, heart pounding, when the lights flickered back on, revealing muddy footprints trailing from the back door into the house. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The footprints stopped at the living room. Her eyes darted around, searching the shadows. Then she saw it. On the wall near the window, written in smudged, dripping letters, was a message that hadn't been there before. "I see you." The storm raged outside, but inside, the house felt colder than ever. Emma wasn't alone, and the night was far from over.
Story number 4.
The rain had been falling steadily all evening, drumming a relentless rhythm against the windows of the old house. Jason was home alone for the first time in weeks. His parents had gone out of town unexpectedly, leaving him with only the flickering TV and the howling wind for company. The power had flickered twice already, plunging the house into darkness before the emergency lights kicked in. He tried to ignore the uneasy feeling settling in his chest, telling himself it was just the storm. Around midnight, the lights went out again, this time refusing to come back on. Jason grabbed a flashlight and wandered through the house, his footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. The rain sounded like it was trying to pound its way through the walls, and the wind whispered through the cracks. As he made his way to the kitchen to check the fuse box, a sharp noise came from the back door, like a slow, deliberate tapping. Frozen, Jason stared at the door, heart hammering. The tapping came again, steady and measured. He wanted to believe it was just a branch or something blown by the storm, but the rhythm was too deliberate, too purposeful. Summoning every ounce of courage, he crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Nothing, just the blackness and the curtain of rain. He tried to close the door, but it suddenly gave a slight creak, as if something or someone was pushing from the other side. Jason's breath hitched. He bolted back to the living room, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The tapping turned into slow, heavy footsteps padding around outside, circling the house. His mind raced with every horror movie cliché he'd ever heard, but this was real. The footsteps stopped just beneath his window. He shone the beam out, but the rain was so thick it distorted the light. Suddenly, a muffled voice whispered through the rain, barely audible, "Jason, let me in." His skin crawled. He knew no one should be out there. He locked every door he could find, retreating upstairs to his bedroom, but the footsteps followed, now scratching at the walls and windows, as if trying to burrow in. In the pitch black, Jason's phone buzzed. A text appeared from an unknown number. "I'm inside." The flashlight flickered and went out. Cold dread filled the room as a shadow shifted beneath the door, slow and deliberate, waiting. The rain hammered harder, drowning out his screams as the night swallowed him whole.